Ethan Brooks slammed his fist on the kitchen table so hard the coffee mug shattered across the floor. "She's leaving," he whispered. "And I never said a word." 5 years of silence. 5 years of watching her through the window, watching her love his daughter like her own. And now she was gone before he ever found the courage. But here's the part nobody saw coming. The morning she was supposed to drive away forever. She was standing in his driveway, waiting. What did she know that he didn't? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next. The morning it all started, Ethan Brooks wasn't thinking about love. He was thinking about the busted fence post on the north end of his property, the vet bill sitting unpaid on his kitchen counter, and whether his 8-year-old daughter had remembered to wear her rain boots before sprinting out the front door. He hadn't. She hadn't. Of course she hadn't. "Lily!" he called out across the yard, his voice cutting through the cold Montana air like a blade. "Get back here and put your boots on!" But Lily was already halfway across the gravel road, her sneakers slapping through every puddle she could find, her dark pigtails flying behind her like she was being chased by something wonderful. She wasn't running from anything. She was running toward the house across the road, toward Olivia Carter's house, like she always did. Ethan stood in the doorway of his farmhouse, one hand gripping the frame, watching his daughter disappear up Olivia's front porch steps. He shook his head. He thought about calling her back again. He thought about it for about 3 seconds. Then, he let her go. Because that's what mornings looked like now. That's what his life looked like. Lily racing toward Olivia before the school bus even showed up. And Ethan standing in doorways, watching, always watching, never quite sure what to do with the feeling that sat heavy in the middle of his chest every time it happened. He told himself it was gratitude. He was good at telling himself things. Ethan Brooks was 35 years old, and he looked every year of it. Not in a bad way. In the way that a man looks when he's been through something real and came out the other side still standing, still working, still showing up every morning even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. He was lean in the way that ranch work makes a man lean. His hands were rough. His jaw always carried a day or two of dark stubble because shaving felt like a luxury he hadn't earned yet. He wore the same worn-out flannel jacket he'd been wearing since before his daughter was born, and he kept meaning to replace it. Kept meaning to do a lot of things, but the days had a way of running out before he got to any of them. 5 years ago, his wife Sarah had died, 31 years old, a brain aneurysm. There one morning, gone by afternoon, Lily had been 3, Ethan had been 30, and the world, which had felt solid and certain, and his, had simply collapsed. Not dramatically, not all at once the way it does in the movies. It had collapsed quietly, like a structure slowly losing its foundation. Like a man standing in a field watching the horizon tilt and not knowing which way to run. He hadn't run anywhere. He'd stayed. He'd stayed for Lily. He'd stayed for the ranch. He'd stayed because leaving felt like admitting that he didn't know how to be the man he was supposed to be. And Ethan Brooks had never in his life admitted something like that out loud. So he stayed, and he worked. And he raised his daughter in the only way he knew how. By being present, by being steady, by doing the next thing and the thing after that, and never stopping long enough to notice the silence that lived inside the walls of his house. He was good at the staying. He was less good at the other things. Olivia Carter had lived across the road from Ethan for 3 years. He hadn't noticed her at first. That sounds terrible, and he knew it. But the truth was that in those early years after Sarah, Ethan wasn't noticing much of anything that didn't need to be fed or fixed or filed with the bank. The world had narrowed down to a very small list of things that required his immediate attention, and the woman across the road wasn't on it. Then one afternoon in September, Lily had been 6, just started first grade. Ethan had come home from a long day of fencing to find his daughter sitting on Olivia's front steps, crying. He'd crossed the road at a jog, his heart hammering, already running through the list of disasters. But before he got to the steps, Olivia had come through the front door carrying 2 glasses of lemonade and a box of Band-Aids, and she'd sat down next to Lily with the calm, unhurried patience of someone who had absolutely nowhere else to be. "She scraped her knee getting off the bus," Olivia said, looking up at Ethan with dark, steady eyes. "We were just getting acquainted." Lily had looked up at him then, sniffling. Her knee freshly bandaged with a cartoon dinosaur Band-Aid. "She has the good ones, Daddy," Lily said. "The dinosaur kind." Ethan had stood there in his muddy work boots and his worn flannel jacket, looking at this woman, this calm, unhurried, dinosaur Band-Aid woman, and he hadn't known what to say. So he'd said, "Thank you." And Olivia had smiled and said, "Of course." And that was how it started. Not with fireworks, not with any of the things people talk about when they talk about beginnings. Just a scraped knee and a cartoon dinosaur, and a woman who had nowhere else to be. After that day, Lily decided that Olivia Carter was one of the most important people in the world. She decided this the way 8-year-olds decide things, completely, immediately, and without any possibility of being argued out of it. Olivia was Lily's teacher that year, 2nd grade, and from the first week of school, Lily came home with stories. "Miss Carter, let us pick our own reading books today, Daddy." Miss Carter said I was a really good listener. "Miss Carter has a cat named Biscuit, and she lets him sleep on the couch." Ethan would nod and say, "That's great, Bug," and pour himself a second cup of coffee and not think too hard about the warmth that settled into his chest when his daughter talked about this woman. But the mornings kept happening. Lily kept running across the road, and Ethan kept standing in the doorway. And somewhere in there, without his permission, Olivia Carter had stopped being the woman across the road and started being something he didn't have a word for yet. The afternoon of the joke, because that's what he called it later, the afternoon of the joke, like it was something small, started like any other Saturday. Lily had a school project due Monday. Something about Montana history, something involving a poster board and about 47 colored markers and what appeared to be an entire bottle of glitter glue. Ethan had exactly 0 ability to help with glitter glue projects. He knew this about himself. So when Lily asked if Miss Carter could come over to help, Ethan had said yes before he fully processed the words coming out of his own mouth. Olivia showed up at 2 in the afternoon with a bag full of craft supplies and a smile that made Lily shriek with delight and throw her arms around her teacher's waist. Ethan held the door open. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Wouldn't miss it," Olivia said. And then she was inside his house, sitting on the floor of his living room, cross-legged next to his daughter, cutting out construction paper shapes and explaining the history of the Lewis and Clark expedition in a way that somehow made a 3rd grader completely riveted. Ethan sat on the couch with a cup of coffee and his ranch accounts and told himself he was working. He was not working. He was watching Olivia Carter teach his daughter about explorers, and he was noticing, for the first time, or maybe for the 100th time without admitting it, how she smiled when Lily got excited. How she asked questions instead of giving answers, coaxing Lily to think it through herself. How when Lily's glitter glue cap popped off and sprayed silver sparkles across the carpet, Olivia didn't flinch or gasp or look at Ethan with that familiar expression of "Sorry, am I in the wrong place?" She just laughed, bright and genuine and surprised by her own laughter. And Lily laughed too. And Ethan sat on the couch with his ranch accounts and felt something crack open, small and quiet, somewhere behind his sternum. He closed the accounts folder. He watched them work. An hour passed, maybe more. Lily held up the finished poster board. Uneven letters, crooked map, spectacular quantity of glitter. With the kind of pride that only exists when you're 8 years old and you've made something with your hands and someone you love helped you do it. "What do you think, Daddy?" "Best one in the whole state," Ethan said. And he meant it. Lily beamed. She turned to Olivia. "And you, what do you think?" Olivia looked at the poster with mock seriousness, tilting her head one way and then the other. "I think," she said slowly, "that your teacher is going to be very impressed." "You are my teacher." "Exactly." Olivia's eyes sparkled. So I should know." Lily dissolved into giggles and ran down the hallway with her poster, yelling something about hanging it on her bedroom wall before it was officially Monday. And just like that, it was quiet. Ethan and Olivia sat in the living room with glitter on the carpet and an empty bag of craft supplies between them, and the silence was easy in a way that silences rarely were anymore. Olivia started cleaning up the markers, capping them one by one. Ethan watched her. He was aware, in the particular way that happens when you're trying very hard not to be aware of something, that the room felt warmer than usual, that the afternoon light was falling across Olivia's hair in a way that he had no business noticing, that she hummed very quietly to herself while she cleaned up, barely audible, like she didn't realize she was doing it. He looked at his hands. He looked at the glitter on the carpet. He looked at the woman sitting on his living room floor, and he thought, someone is going to love her so completely it'll knock them sideways. Someone is going to be the luckiest man alive, and he doesn't even know it yet. And then, because he'd spent 5 years using humor as a fire extinguisher for feelings he didn't know how to handle, Ethan Brooks opened his mouth. "You know," he said, keeping his voice light, aiming for casual, aiming for the kind of easy observation a man makes about the weather or a sports score. "Whoever marries you one day is going to be very lucky." He expected a laugh. He expected maybe an eye roll and a "stop it," and they'd both move on, and the afternoon would return to its comfortable, uncomplicated shape. He was not prepared for what he got. Olivia stopped capping markers. She looked up at him, not startled, not embarrassed, just still, with those dark, steady eyes that had always seen things more clearly than he was comfortable with. And then she smiled, slow and certain. "I agree," she said. 2 words, calm as anything, like she'd been sitting on the answer for a long time and had simply been waiting for the question. The silence that followed was not the easy kind. Ethan felt the words land somewhere in the center of his chest and stay there, warm and unmoving. He had no follow-up. He had no recovery line. He had nothing, because the joke had stopped being a joke, and he had absolutely no roadmap for what came next. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything. And then Lily came thundering back down the hallway in her socks, sliding the last 3 feet across the hardwood floor, and announced that Biscuit the cat needed to come visit, and could Miss Carter please bring him next time. And just like that, the moment folded itself away. Ethan laughed. Olivia laughed. Lily demanded to know what was funny. But later, much later, after Olivia had driven back across the road, and Lily was asleep, and the house was quiet again. Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and replayed 2 words over and over until he wasn't sure if he was afraid of them or if he was afraid of what it meant that he didn't want to forget them. "I agree." He pressed his fingers to his mouth. He had meant it as a joke, but the truth he sat with alone in his quiet kitchen while the Montana wind moved through the fields outside, was that somewhere between the glitter glue and the laughter and the easy silence and the way she hummed without realizing it, the joke had told the truth. And the truth was something he had no idea what to do with. He didn't sleep well that night. He lay in the dark of his bedroom, the same bedroom he'd shared with Sarah, the bedroom he'd repainted twice because the old color made him too sad, the bedroom that still sometimes felt too wide on one side. And he stared at the ceiling and told himself the same things he'd been telling himself for 5 years. You have a daughter to raise. You have a ranch to keep alive. You don't have room for this. You don't know how to do this. You will only hurt her. You will only hurt Lily. You will only get hurt. The ceiling didn't argue with him. The ceiling never did. He closed his eyes. He saw Olivia's smile, slow and certain, like she'd been sitting on the answer for a long time. He opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. He did not sleep for a very long time. Sunday came gray and drizzling. Ethan worked the fence line on the north end of the property, the one he'd been meaning to fix for 2 weeks. He worked hard and fast and without stopping, the way he always worked when something was moving around in his head, that he didn't want to look at directly. At noon, he came back to the barn to find Lily sitting on a hay bale, talking to his oldest horse, a bay quarter horse named Cooper, who had the particular gift of listening without offering opinions. Lily did that sometimes when she was processing something. Talk to Cooper. Ethan respected it. He did some version of the same thing himself, just with fence posts instead of horses. "You're not supposed to be in here without me," Ethan said, but without any real heat in it. "I know," Lily said. She was quiet for a moment. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Bug." "Do you think Miss Carter likes it here?" Ethan sat down on a hay bale across from her. He took off his gloves. He turned them over in his hands. "What do you mean?" "Like..." Lily thought about it. "Does she like coming here? To our house?" "I think so." He paused. "Why?" Lily shrugged in the exaggerated, unconvincing way that children shrug when they are absolutely not just shrugging. "She always seems really happy when she's here," Lily said. "Happier than at school, and she laughs more." A pause. "She laughed at your joke yesterday." Ethan looked at his daughter, his 8-year-old daughter, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, watching him with an expression that was far older than her years. "She was just being polite," Ethan said. "No, she wasn't." "Lily, Daddy." Lily's voice was patient in the way children are sometimes patient with adults who are being slow. "She wasn't being polite, she was being real." Ethan put his gloves down on the hay bale. He looked at his daughter. He breathed in through his nose. "When'd you get so smart?" he said finally. Lily considered this. "I've always been this smart," she said. "You just don't always pay attention." He laughed, surprised and genuine, and a little helpless. Cooper the horse turned his big head and regarded them both with patient brown eyes. And Ethan sat there in his barn on a drizzling Sunday morning, laughing at something his daughter said, and thought, "I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." But for the first time in a long time, that felt less like a failure and more like a beginning. He just didn't know yet what he was beginning, or how much it was going to cost him before it was over. The Monday after the glitter glue afternoon, Ethan drove Lily to school himself instead of putting her on the bus. He told himself it was because the bus had been running late all week, and he had an early feed delivery coming in at 7:30, and it just made more sense logistically. He was lying to himself, and he knew it, and he did it anyway. He pulled up in front of Millbrook Elementary at 7:52, and Lily had her seatbelt off before the truck was fully stopped, and she was halfway out the door when she turned back and said, "Are you going to come in?" "I wasn't planning on it," Ethan said. Lily looked at him with those old eyes in that young face. "Okay," she said. And then she was gone, sprinting up the front steps with her backpack bouncing, and Ethan sat in the idling truck in the drop-off lane and told himself to pull out into traffic and go home. He sat there for 45 seconds. Then he turned off the engine and went inside. He told himself he needed to drop off the permission slip for next month's field trip, which was technically true since it had been sitting on his counter for a week, but was not in any way the reason he was walking down the hallway of an elementary school at 7:53 on a Monday morning. He heard her before he saw her. Olivia's classroom was at the end of the third-grade hall, and her door was open, and her voice carried. Not loud, never loud, but clear in the way that certain voices are clear, the kind that cuts through noise without effort. She was reading something aloud to the handful of early arrivals who had beaten the bell. Something about a boy who found a map in his grandfather's attic. Ethan stood just outside the doorway and listened for a moment without meaning to. 3 kids were completely still. That was the part that got him. He'd been in enough rooms to know that getting 8-year-olds completely still was roughly equivalent to stopping traffic with one hand. And Olivia did it without raising her voice, or asking them to sit down, or promising candy. She just read, and they just listened, and the room held its breath. Ethan put the permission slip in the office mail slot and drove home. He did not think about it on the drive back. He thought about it the entire drive back. By the time he pulled up to the ranch, he had made a decision. He was going to do what he always did when something threatened to complicate his life in ways he couldn't control. He was going to work harder, stay busier, give whatever was growing in his chest exactly no room to breathe, and wait for it to go away like every other feeling he'd successfully starved out over the past 5 years. It was a solid plan. It lasted approximately 4 days. On Friday afternoon, Lily came home from school and announced, without preamble or warning, that she had invited Miss Carter to dinner on Saturday. Ethan was standing at the stove. He turned around slowly. "You did what?" She said yes. Lily added helpfully. "Lily, bug. You can't just invite people to dinner without asking me first." "Why not?" "Because—" Ethan stopped. He realized he didn't have a good answer that didn't involve explaining things to his 8-year-old that he wasn't prepared to explain to himself. "Because we need to have food." "We have food," Lily said. She pointed at the refrigerator with the confidence of someone who has never once had to plan a meal. "There's stuff in there. There's eggs and half a block of cheese and something I'm pretty sure has gone bad." Lily considered this. "So we'll go to the store." "That's not the point." "Daddy." Lily crossed her arms. She had Sarah's way of crossing her arms. It still knocked the breath out of him sometimes. "Miss Carter said yes. She's coming at 6. I already told her 6. Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment. He thought about arguing. He thought about calling Olivia and explaining that there had been a miscommunication, and his 8-year-old had apparently taken charge of his social calendar without consulting him. He turned back to the stove. "Fine," he said. "We're going to the store." Lily made a sound that could only be described as triumphant. He grabbed his keys off the counter and tried very hard not to think about the fact that his pulse was doing something he hadn't felt in 5 years. He failed at that too. Saturday came the way Saturdays in Montana come in early spring, cold and bright and unforgiving, the kind of morning that dares you to stay indoors. Ethan cleaned the house in the morning, which he told himself was something he did regularly and not something he was doing because company was coming. He swept the kitchen floor twice. He found a tablecloth he hadn't used since the last time anyone had actually set the table for a reason, and he shook it out and put it on the table. And then he looked at it and thought it looked like he was trying too hard, and he took it off. And then he thought the bare table looked depressing, and he put it back. He left it on. Lily spent the morning arranging things on the table that did not need to be arranged. A candle Ethan didn't remember buying. A small mason jar with some dried wildflowers that she had apparently been saving in her room. A folded paper napkin on each plate that she had spent 20 minutes trying to make look like a swan, and had ultimately conceded looked more like a crumpled duck. "It's a crane," Lily said defensively when Ethan raised an eyebrow. "It's perfect," he said. She beamed. Olivia arrived at 6 on the dot. Not 5:59. Not 6:03. 6 exactly, which told Ethan something about her that he filed away without knowing why. She came in carrying a small pan of something that smelled like butter and brown sugar, and immediately made the entire front room feel warmer. "Peach cobbler," she said, holding it out. "I hope that's all right. I didn't want to show up empty-handed." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said simply. Lily grabbed Olivia's free hand and began pulling her toward the kitchen, already talking at full speed about the crane napkins and the candle and the entire menu she'd planned, which apparently included a detailed breakdown of everything in Ethan's refrigerator and what could theoretically be done with it. Ethan stood in the doorway of his own kitchen and watched Olivia let herself be pulled, laughing at something Lily said, already answering questions, already fully present in a way that some people spend their whole lives learning and never quite get. He stayed in the doorway for 3 seconds longer than he should have. Then he went in and started cooking. They made pasta together, which was not what Ethan had planned. But Lily had found the dry pasta in the back of a cabinet and announced it was perfect. And Olivia had agreed. And somehow all 3 of them ended up in the kitchen simultaneously. Lily on the step stool stirring the sauce, Olivia dicing tomatoes at the counter, and Ethan standing at the stove trying to pay attention to the water he was supposed to be watching boil, You're staring at it, Olivia said, without looking up from the cutting board. What? The water. You're staring at it. That's why it won't boil. That's not a real thing. She glanced over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised. Isn't it? Scientifically. Daddy, Lily said from the step stool. Miss Carter is right. How would you know? You're 8. I'm very wise for my age, Lily said serenely, and Olivia made a sound that was almost a laugh, pressing her lips together. Ethan looked at the two of them, his daughter on the step stool, his neighbor at the counter, both of them conspiring against him in his own kitchen, and felt something move through him that was warm and unfamiliar and almost frightening in how good it felt. He looked back at the pot. The water was boiling. He didn't say anything about it. Neither did Olivia, but he heard the smile in her silence. Dinner stretched long in the way that good dinners do, where nobody is watching the clock and the food runs out before the conversation does. Lily talked about school, about a boy named Marcus, who had put a rubber lizard in the pencil cup and gotten sent to the principal's office, about a book she was reading that she thought Olivia needed to read immediately and possibly today. Olivia asked questions. Real ones, not the polite kind. She leaned forward when Lily answered. She remembered things Lily had mentioned weeks ago and asked about them now. And Lily lit up every time. That particular light that comes from being genuinely remembered by someone who didn't have to. Ethan watched all of this. He watched it and understood, with the kind of clarity that arrives quietly and lands hard, that this was not a woman who was kind to his daughter because she felt sorry for them, or because it was part of her job, or because she was performing some version of goodness for an audience. She was like this because she was this. There was no distance between Olivia Carter and the kindness she moved through the world with. It wasn't a thing she did. It was a thing she was. He looked down at his plate. He picked up his fork. He ate his pasta and did not look at her again for a full 2 minutes because he didn't trust what his face would do if he did. After dinner, Lily declared it was cobbler time with the authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment specifically, and Olivia served it with the small scoop of vanilla ice cream she had quietly tucked into the freezer when she arrived, which Lily discovered and responded to with a level of joy normally reserved for Christmas mornings. Later, Ethan washed the dishes and Olivia dried them. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with one of her books open on her chest, fully clothed, shoes still on, which was her particular method of falling asleep. Sudden and complete, like a light switch. They worked without talking for a little while. Just the sound of water and the quiet clink of dishes and the wind outside, and it was easy again. That particular kind of easy that Ethan had given up thinking was possible. She does that, Olivia said softly, glancing toward Lily on the couch. Falls asleep mid-sentence sometimes, in class. Does she? Usually when we're reading. She fights it for a while and then just... Olivia made a small gesture with the dish towel. Goes. Ethan looked at his daughter. She does it at home too, he said. Always has. Even when she was little, she'd be talking and then she'd just be asleep, like someone cut a wire. She's like you, Olivia said. Ethan looked up. How do you mean? Olivia was quiet for a moment, folding the dish towel over the oven handle. She pushes right up to the edge of things, she said carefully. And then when she finally lets herself rest, she rests completely. She paused, like she earned it. Ethan didn't answer. Because the thing about what Olivia just said was that it was exactly right, and it was about Lily, and it was also not entirely about Lily, and they both knew it. And neither of them said so. Olivia looked at the window above the sink. Ethan looked at the dish in his hand. I had a good time tonight, she said, quietly, honestly. Not the polite kind of good time, the real kind. So did we, Ethan said. And then, before his better judgment could stop him, so did I. She turned to look at him. He looked back. And there was that moment again. The same one from last Saturday. From the living room with the glitter on the carpet, and the 2 words that had kept him awake until 2 in the morning. That particular stillness between 2 people, when something is being said that doesn't have words yet. Ethan, she started. "I should let you get home," he said. She stopped. Something flickered across her face. Not hurt. Something smaller and more controlled than hurt. Something that looked like patience wearing thin. "Right," she said. "Of course." She got her coat from the hook by the door. She said goodnight to sleeping Lily from across the room, voice low and gentle. She told Ethan the cobbler pan could wait, and he could return it whenever. He held the door open. She walked out. He stood in the open doorway and watched her cross the road and go inside her house and close her front door. He stood there in the cold for longer than he should have. Then he went inside and locked up and picked Lily up off the couch. She didn't wake, just made a small sound and curled against his shoulder like she'd been doing since she was 3 years old. And he carried her down the hall and put her to bed. He sat on the edge of her mattress in the dark. He listened to her breathe. He thought about a woman who bought the good Band-Aids, who read to early arrivals before the bell rang, who remembered every small thing Lily had ever mentioned, who hid vanilla ice cream in his freezer before dinner so his daughter could be surprised. He thought about the way she'd said, "I had a good time tonight," not performing it, not filling space with it, just saying it, plain and true, the way people say things when they mean them. He thought about the word courage. He didn't know why he thought that word, but there it was. He got up. He went to the kitchen. He stood at the counter and looked out the window at the dark road and the lit window in the house across it. Her light was still on. He put his hand flat on the counter. He pressed down until he could feel the cold of the laminate against his palm. He had sent her home. Again. Because he was afraid, and he knew he was afraid, and knowing it hadn't helped at all. The light across the road went out. Ethan stood at the window in the dark. He didn't move for a long time, and somewhere behind the fear, buried under all the grief and caution and 5 years of telling himself the very good reasons he had for keeping everyone at a careful, survivable distance, something was pushing upward. Slow and stubborn and inevitable, like something that had been waiting underground for a very long time. He didn't name it that night, but he felt it, and that was the beginning of something he was not going to be able to stop. 3 weeks passed. Ethan got better at pretending, and worse at it at the same time, which is a specific kind of misery. He saw Olivia at school pickup twice, and at the hardware store once, and at the town's monthly potluck dinner, where she brought a sweet potato casserole and ended up spending 45 minutes helping Earl Gunderson figure out how to text his grandkids' photos, sitting next to him at the corner table with the patience of a saint, while Earl squinted at the screen and said, "But where'd the picture go?" approximately 11 times. Ethan watched from across the room. He was talking to Pete Callahan about alfalfa prices. He had no idea what he said about alfalfa prices. Pete looked at him a little strangely by the end of the conversation, and Ethan didn't blame him. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything, or the first thing that changed everything, in a sequence of things that were all about to change in ways Ethan couldn't yet see. He got a call from the school at 2:15. His chest clenched before the receptionist finished the sentence. It always did, that particular paternal terror that lives permanently just under the surface when you're the only parent. But it wasn't an emergency. Lily had a headache and a low-grade fever, and needed to be picked up. He was there in 12 minutes. Lily was in the front office on the little cot they kept there, wrapped in a thin blanket, her face pale and her dark eyes glassy. She looked small in a way that always sucker-punched him. She spent so much of her life filling up whatever room she was in that he sometimes forgot how small she actually was. "Hey, Bug," he said, crouching next to the cot. She reached for his hand immediately. "I don't feel good," she said. "I know." He pressed his hand to her forehead, warm, but not alarming. "We're going home." He was signing her out at the desk when he heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Olivia standing in the office doorway, her expression caught somewhere between professional and something more personal. "I saw her on the way to the office," she said. "How bad is it?" "Just a low fever," Ethan said. "She'll be fine." Olivia looked past him to where Lily was sitting up on the cot now, watching. "Miss Carter," Lily said, with the particular tragic dignity of a child who is sick and wants everyone to be aware of it. Olivia went straight to her. She crouched down the same way Ethan had, same level, same attention. "You need anything before you go? Water? There are crackers in my desk drawer, the good kind." "The good kind?" Lily said. "Cheddar fish." Lily considered this with the gravity of someone weighing a major decision. "Maybe a few," she said. Olivia was gone and back in 3 minutes with a small bag of crackers and a water bottle and a sticky note she pressed into Lily's hand that said, "Feel better. Bug with a small drawing of a dinosaur," which made Lily smile despite the headache. Ethan watched all of this. His throat felt tight. He carried Lily out to the truck and buckled her in and drove home. And Lily fell asleep before they hit the county road, her cheek pressed against the window, the sticky note still in her hand. Ethan drove. He thought about Olivia crouching next to his daughter. He thought about the crackers, the good kind. He thought about the sticky note with the dinosaur on it. He thought, "I am so tired of being afraid." The thought arrived fully formed, no warning, no preamble. Just that. I am so tired of being afraid. He drove the rest of the way home with his hands tight on the wheel and something shifting inside him. Large and slow and long overdue, like a glacier finally deciding to move. He got Lily settled on the couch with a blanket and the television on low. He made her soup from a can because she liked it better than the real kind, which had always seemed backwards to him, but he'd stopped arguing about it years ago. He gave her children's Tylenol and checked her temperature twice. She fell asleep again by 5. Ethan sat in the armchair across from her and watched her sleep. He thought about what it would mean. To say something. To stop sending Olivia home. To stop standing in doorways, watching her cross the road. He thought about all the ways it could go wrong. He thought about Lily. And then he thought about Lily's face when Olivia sat next to her on that office cot. The immediate, unconscious relief of it. The way Lily had reached for Olivia's eye contact the same way she'd reached for Ethan's hand. Instinctively, trustingly, with no hesitation at all. His daughter already knew. His daughter had probably known before he did. He leaned his head back against the chair. He closed his eyes. He stayed that way for a long time, in the quiet of his house with his sleeping daughter and the low sound of the television and the Montana wind outside, and let himself feel all of it. The fear and the grief, and underneath both of those, stubborn and quiet and entirely unwilling to be starved out. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. He didn't push it down. For the first time in 5 years, he let it stay. He didn't sleep well that night either. Lily's fever broke around midnight. Ethan knew because he checked her every 2 hours, the way he'd done since she was an infant, moving through the dark hallway on instinct and muscle memory, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead, listening to her breathe, pulling the blanket up when it slipped. It was the most natural thing in the world, and it was also the loneliest, and he'd long ago stopped trying to separate those two truths. By 2 in the morning, her temperature was normal. By 2:15, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water he wasn't drinking, and he was thinking about what he'd decided in the armchair, that he was tired of being afraid, that he was going to stop sending Olivia home, that something had shifted and he wasn't going to push it back down. By 2:30, the fear was back. Not the vague, ambient fear he'd been managing for 5 years. Something sharper. Something with a specific shape that he hadn't allowed himself to look at directly until now. If he said something and she didn't feel the same way, he would lose her. Not just her. He'd lose what Lily had with her. The crackers, the good kind. The sticky notes with dinosaurs. The way his daughter reached for Olivia's presence the same way she reached for his hand. That was the thing that stopped him at 2:30 in the morning. Not his own heart. Lily's. He put his glass down. He went back to bed. He stared at the ceiling until 4, and then he slept for 3 hours. And when he woke up, his mind was quiet in the particular way minds are quiet after they've been running all night and finally run out of road. He made coffee. He fed the horses. He thought, one day at a time. It was the most boring resolution he'd ever made. It was also the only one he had. One day at a time lasted 11 days. On the 12th day, Janet Hollis came into his life, and everything he thought he understood about what was happening between him and Olivia Carter rearranged itself into something he hadn't seen coming. Janet Hollis was 63 years old, retired, and knew everything about everyone in Millbrook, Montana, not because she was a gossip. She would have objected strongly to that word, but because she had lived there her whole life and paid attention, which in a small town amounts to the same thing. She was on the school board, the church committee, and the historical society, and she had strong opinions about all three. She also had a niece who taught art at Millbrook Elementary and called her every Sunday, which meant Janet Hollis was generally better informed about the inner workings of that school than most people who actually worked there. She caught Ethan at the feed store on a Wednesday afternoon. "Ethan Brooks," she said, the way she always said it, like his full name was a statement that required confirmation. "Janet," he said. She fell into step beside him down the aisle without being invited, which was also something she always did. "I hear Lily's been under the weather," she said. "She's fine. 24-hour thing." "Good, good." A pause that had intention in it. "I also hear there's been some news over at the school." Ethan stopped walking. He looked at her. Janet Hollis had the particular expression of a woman delivering information she considers important and is watching carefully to see how it lands. "What kind of news?" he said. "About Olivia Carter," she said. "About a job offer." He felt something cold move through him. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Which was true. "Well." Janet adjusted the bag on her shoulder. "I'm sure it's just talk, but my niece says they've been asking Olivia about coming up to Billings. Principal position at one of the big district schools. Something she's apparently been working toward for years." She paused. "Full administrative package. Significant salary jump. Prestige." Another pause. "It's a real opportunity by all accounts." Ethan stood in the feed store aisle. He heard the words. He processed them in the part of his brain that processed information, while the rest of him went very, very still. "Like I said," Janet continued, a little more gently now, because Janet Hollis was not actually cruel, just direct. "It's probably just talk." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Probably." He finished his shopping. He drove home. He unloaded the feed in the barn and did it slowly, one bag at a time, methodical and automatic, because his hands needed something to do while his mind ran in circles he couldn't stop. Billings, a principal position. Something she's apparently been working toward for years. He set down the last bag. He stood in the barn. Cooper, the horse, turned his big head and looked at him with those patient brown eyes. And for once, Ethan had nothing to say to him. He didn't bring it up to Olivia. He didn't ask her directly, because asking directly would have meant admitting he cared about the answer in a way he wasn't ready to admit. He told himself he was waiting for more information. He was good at telling himself things. What he was actually doing was watching. He was watching her more carefully now than he had before, which was saying something, because he had been paying significant attention for months without admitting it. He watched her at school pickup. He watched her when she came over on Thursday afternoon to help Lily with a reading assignment. He watched the way she moved through his house, easy and unhurried, like she belonged there, and he thought, is she already leaving? Is she already gone and I just can't see it yet? Lily, who missed nothing, picked up on it by Friday. "Why are you being weird?" she asked at dinner, in the direct and unsparing way that was entirely her own. "I'm not being weird," Ethan said. "You're being quiet." "I'm always quiet." "Not this quiet." Lily pushed a piece of carrot around her plate. "Is it about Miss Carter?" He looked at his daughter. "Why would it be about Miss Carter?" Lily lifted one shoulder. "Because you always get more quiet when you're thinking about something you don't want to talk about. And the last time you got this quiet was when you were deciding whether to sell the north pasture. And before that, it was when you thought Cooper might be sick." She looked at him steadily. "You only get this quiet about things that matter." Ethan put his fork down. He looked at his 8-year-old daughter, who was watching him with those old patient eyes. "When did you get this observant?" he said. "I've always been this observant," Lily said. "You're just now noticing." He almost smiled despite himself, but the cold thing that had settled in his chest when Janet Hollis said the word Billings didn't go anywhere. He cleared the table. He washed the dishes. He stood at the window and looked at the lit window across the road and thought, I should talk to her. I should just walk across that road and knock on that door and say what exactly? Don't go? Stay? I've been standing in doorways watching you for months and I'm done doing that? He stood at the window for 20 minutes. Then Lily called from her room that she needed help with something, and he went, and the moment passed, and the window across the road stayed lit for another hour, and then went dark. He did not sleep at all that night. The next morning, Saturday, 10 days after Janet's news, Ethan was in the barn when he heard tires on gravel and looked up to see a car he didn't recognize pulling into Olivia's driveway. A silver sedan with a rental agency sticker. A man got out, mid-40s, dressed in the kind of clothes that said he'd come from somewhere with an airport. He knocked on Olivia's door. She answered. They shook hands and went inside. Ethan watched from the barn doorway. He stood there for 30 seconds, long enough to see the door close. Then he went back to work. He worked until noon. He didn't go in for breakfast. Cooper ate his grain and didn't offer an opinion. At 12:15, the silver sedan backed out of Olivia's driveway and drove away. At 12:20, Ethan was in the kitchen making a sandwich he had no appetite for when his phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from Olivia. It said, "Are you home? Can we talk?" He stared at the text for a long time. He typed, "Sure." Then he deleted it. He typed, "Yeah, come over." Then he deleted that too. He set the phone face down on the counter. Then he picked it up and typed, "Yes," and sent it before he could overthink it further. She knocked 3 minutes later. She came in with her coat still on, which she never did. She always hung it up immediately on the hook by the door. She kept it on, and she sat down at the kitchen table, and she looked at him with the expression of someone who has made a decision and is still deciding how to say it. He sat across from her. He waited. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay," he said. "I've been offered a position," she said, "in Billings, principal at Ridgeview Elementary. It's a district school, about 1,200 students. It's a significant opportunity." She paused. "I've been working toward something like this for a long time." "I know," Ethan said. She stopped. "You know?" "Janet Hollis," he said. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. "Of course," she said. Silence. Then, "When do you have to decide?" he asked. "They want an answer by the end of the month," she said. "I have 2 weeks." 2 weeks. He nodded slowly, like he was processing information about a fence repair or a vet appointment, like she was telling him something that required calm, practical consideration. He was very good at looking calm. He'd been practicing for 5 years. Inside his chest, something was tearing slowly in half. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Olivia looked at her hands flat on the table. "I'm thinking it's everything I thought I wanted," she said quietly. "A year ago, I would have said yes before they finished the sentence." "But?" Ethan said. She looked up. The but sat in the air between them, heavy and specific, pointing at something neither of them had named out loud. "But things are different now," she said. He held her gaze. He thought, say it. Say the thing. Say what things are different. Say why they're different. Say what you've been waiting for him to have the courage to say for months. He said nothing. The silence went on for 3 full seconds, which doesn't sound long until you're inside it. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. A ranch call. His supplier with a delivery question. He glanced at it instinctively. Olivia looked at the table. "I should let you get that," she said, and she was already standing, already pulling her coat tighter. "Olivia, I just wanted you to hear it from me," she said, before anyone else said something. "I appreciate that," he said. which was true and also completely inadequate, and he knew it. She nodded. She went to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. For one moment she stood there with her back to him, and he could see the tension in her shoulders, the specific tension of a person waiting. One more second, just one more. He said nothing. She opened the door. She left. He stood in his kitchen and listened to her footsteps on the gravel and the sound of her front door closing across the road. He picked up his phone. He did not call his supplier back. He sat down in the chair she'd been sitting in, still warm, and he pressed his fist against his mouth, and he thought, "You are the most stubborn kind of fool there is. You are standing here losing her one silence at a time." He sat there for a long time. The house was very quiet. Then he heard a sound from down the hall. Lily's door. She came out slowly, and one look at her face told him she had heard at least part of it. Not all, maybe, but enough. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. Her face was doing something complicated, that particular 8-year-old thing of feeling something very large and not having the vocabulary to contain it. "Is she leaving?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at his daughter. He thought about lying. He thought about saying probably not, or we don't know yet, or don't worry. "She might be," he said instead. Because Lily deserved the truth, and because Ethan was done managing things that couldn't be managed. Lily's face went through 3 expressions in quick succession. Shock, then something that looked like the early warning signs of real grief, then something harder and younger and more afraid than Ethan had seen on her face in years. "But she can't leave," Lily said. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Bug, she can't." Lily crossed her arms over her chest, and this time the gesture wasn't Sarah's confident stance. It was something smaller, something protective, something a child does when they're trying to hold themselves together. "She's ours." The word hit Ethan somewhere below the ribs. He crossed the kitchen. He put his arms around his daughter. She let him, burying her face against his shoulder, and he felt her breathing go ragged for a moment before she steadied it. And he held on and thought about the word she'd used, ours, and what it cost her to say it, and what it told him about the things he'd been too slow to say himself. He stood there holding his daughter in his kitchen. He thought about 2 weeks. He thought about a woman with her hand on a door handle, waiting one more second. He thought about all the silences he'd chosen when he could have chosen words. He thought, "You cannot keep doing this. You cannot keep choosing silence and calling it protection." He pressed his cheek to the top of Lily's head. He made no promises out loud. But somewhere in that kitchen, holding his daughter while the house sat quiet around them and the road outside was empty and still, something in Ethan Brooks stopped negotiating with his own fear. He didn't know yet what he was going to do. He knew he was not going to do nothing. That was the moment the clock started. 14 days. And he had already wasted one of them. 13 days left. That was how Ethan started counting. Not forward, the way people count toward something good. Backward, the way you count toward a deadline, toward a door closing, toward the moment when not deciding becomes a decision all by itself. He woke up Sunday morning with that number in his head, like an alarm he hadn't set. 13 days. He made coffee. He fed the horses. He stood at the kitchen window and looked at the road and thought about what Lily had said the night before. She had fallen asleep in his arms on the couch, which hadn't happened since she was 6, and he'd carried her to bed and stood in her doorway afterward thinking about the word she'd used. Ours. She's ours. Not mine, not yours. Ours. His 8-year-old daughter had understood something in 5 minutes that he'd spent months trying not to understand. He drank his coffee. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again and typed, "Good morning. Just checking in." And then he stared at it for a full minute before deleting every word. Because "good morning, just checking in" was the most cowardly sentence he'd ever almost sent, and he knew it. He put the phone in his jacket pocket and went out to work. He worked all morning the way he'd been working for days now, hard and fast and without stopping. Like if he kept moving, he could outrun the thing building in his chest. He fixed the gate latch on the south paddock. He restacked the hay bales that had shifted in the corner of the barn. He cleaned Cooper's hooves and checked the others and did 3 things on his to-do list that had been sitting there for 2 months, and none of it helped even slightly. At 11:30, Pete Callahan's truck pulled up. Pete was Ethan's nearest neighbor in the other direction, a 60-year-old cattle rancher with 3 grown kids, and the particular kind of steady quiet that comes from decades of hard work and few regrets. He and Ethan weren't close in the way people who talked a lot were close, but they were close in the way that men who've worked side by side through bad winters are close, which is a different and sometimes more durable thing. Pete got out of the truck and leaned against the hood and didn't say anything for a moment, which was normal for Pete. Ethan walked over. "You look terrible," Pete said. That was also normal for Pete. "Thanks," Ethan said. Pete crossed his arms. He looked at the road. He looked back at Ethan. "Heard about the Carter woman," he said. "The job in Billings." Ethan said nothing. "Half the town's heard," Pete said. "You know how it is." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I know." Pete was quiet for a moment. Then, "You gonna do something about it?" Ethan looked at the road. "I don't know," he said. Pete made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "That's not an answer." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not." Pete pushed off the hood. He looked at Ethan the way older men look at younger ones when they're watching them make the same mistakes that only feel unique the first time. "Sarah would have told you by now," Pete said. It was the first time anyone had said Sarah's name to him in months, maybe longer. It landed the way it always landed. Not like a wound, exactly, more like a bell struck in an empty room, resonating longer than expected. Ethan looked at him. Pete held his gaze without apology. "She would have told you to stop standing in your own way," he said. "She wasn't patient with that kind of thing. You know that." Ethan looked away. He did know that. Sarah had been a lot of things, and patient with self-inflicted suffering had not been one of them. She had once told him, during an argument in their 2nd year of marriage, that the most exhausting thing about loving him was watching him choose the hard way on purpose, when the easier way was standing right in front of him. He hadn't changed as much as he thought. "I hear you," Ethan said. "Good," Pete said. He got back in his truck. He started the engine. Then he rolled down the window and said without looking at Ethan, "Clock's ticking, son." He drove away. Ethan stood in the driveway. 12.5 days. He went inside and called Lily for lunch and made grilled cheese because it was her favorite and because he needed to do something normal with his hands. Lily came in and sat at the table and watched him at the stove with those careful eyes that missed nothing. "Did you talk to her?" Lily asked. "Not yet," he said. "Daddy? I know. You always say I know, and then you don't do anything." He set the grilled cheese in front of her. He sat across from her. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, the way he sometimes forgot to because she was so constantly, solidly there. "I'm scared," he said. He hadn't meant to say it. It came out plain and direct, the way truth does when you've been holding it down long enough that it finally just surfaces on its own. Lily looked at him. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her small hand over his. "I know," she said, "but she's scared her." He looked at his daughter's hand on his. "What do you mean?" he said. Lily picked up her sandwich. "She thinks you don't want her to stay," she said, with the straightforward clarity of someone who has been paying attention to the actual evidence. "She thinks she's bothering you. She thinks when you go quiet, it means go away." Ethan stared at her. "How do you know that?" Lily shrugged. "She told me. Not like that, but I speak teacher." He sat back. He thought about every silence he'd chosen, every door he'd held open, every time he'd said, "I should let you get home," and meant the exact opposite. He thought about the hand on the door handle and the waiting, one more second, and what Olivia must have walked away believing when that second ran out, and he said nothing. He thought, "She thinks you don't want her." He thought, You have been so afraid of losing her that you've been pushing her out the door yourself." He stood up. "I'll be back," he said. Lily looked up at him. "Now?" she said. "Now." A beat. Then Lily nodded, small and certain, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Okay," she said. "Go." He went. He crossed the road without his jacket, which he only realized halfway across because the November air hit him and he kept walking anyway. He went up Olivia's porch steps and knocked before he could rearrange his thoughts into something more careful. The door opened. She was in a sweater he hadn't seen before, holding a mug, and her expression went through 3 things in under a second. Surprise, something careful shutting down over it, and then a kind of studied calm. "Ethan?" she said. "Can I come in?" he said. A pause. Short but real. "Of course," she said. He came in. He stood in her living room and looked at her and said, "I need to say something, and I need you to let me get through it before you respond." She set down her mug. She crossed her arms. She said, "All right." He started talking. He wasn't smooth about it. He hadn't planned it, hadn't written anything out in his head, hadn't given himself talking points or an organized structure. He just started at the beginning and went forward. He said, "I've been standing in doorways for 5 years, not just yours. Every doorway. Every room where something might have required me to feel something that scared me. I got very good at being in the doorway and calling it taking care of things." She was watching him steadily. He kept going. "When Sarah died, I made a decision. I didn't make it consciously, but I made it. I decided that loving something that much and then losing it was a thing I would not survive a second time, so I stopped going past the doorway. I stayed exactly where I could see everything and touch nothing." Olivia's arms loosened slightly. Something shifted in her face. "And then you were there," he said. "You were just there, across the road, with the dinosaur band-aids and the good crackers and the vanilla ice cream that you hid in my freezer so Lily could be surprised, and I didn't. I didn't know what to do with you. I didn't have a category for you." "Ethan." "I'm not done," he said. "Please." She closed her mouth. He pressed on. "Every time I let myself get close, I found a reason to pull back. Every time you were in my house, and it felt right. And it always felt right. That's the part that scared me most. I found the exit. I sent you home. I changed the subject. I made a joke." He stopped. "The joke was the worst one. You know which one." A long pause. "I know which one," she said quietly. "I meant it," he said. "That's what I need you to know. I meant it when I said whoever marries you will be very lucky. But I wasn't talking about some hypothetical man. I was talking about myself, and I was too afraid to say it without the cover of a joke. And when you said I agree, I didn't know what to do with that either, so I let it go. I let you go. Again." Silence. The particular kind of silence that has weight. "I heard about Billings," he said. 12 days ago. And my very first thought before anything else, was that I hadn't told you anything true yet. That you were going to leave, and you were going to leave not knowing." Olivia's eyes were bright. She didn't say anything. He took a breath. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I haven't done it in a long time. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to go quiet sometimes when I should talk, and I'm going to stand in doorways when I should walk through them. But I want to try. I want to stop pretending that watching you from across the road is enough, because it isn't. It hasn't been for a long time." He stopped talking. His heart was hammering. He stood there in her living room with the November cold still on his skin from crossing the road without his jacket, and he waited. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Then she uncrossed her arms. She said, "You want to know when I stopped being able to pretend?" He nodded. "The Tuesday Lily was sick," she said. "You came into the school, and you signed her out, and you put her in the truck. And I watched you do it from the office window. And the way you moved, not rushed, not panicked, just completely sure. Like being there for her was the most natural thing in the world, which it is for you. But I watched you do it, and I thought—" She stopped. She looked at the floor. "I thought, I want to be part of that. Not the edges of it. The middle of it." Ethan felt something expand in his chest. "But then you held the door open," she said. "And you said thank you. And you drove away. And I stood at the window and thought, he's never going to say it." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." "I'm not done," she said, and something flickered in her eyes that was almost a smile, despite everything. He closed his mouth. She kept going. "After that I tried to be more careful," she said. "I told myself to stop showing up so much, to create some distance. I thought distance would be easier than this." She gestured at the space between them, at the conversation, at the 12 days counting down. "And then you'd do something. You'd look at me across the table, and the look would last 1 second too long. Or you'd laugh at something Lily said, and you'd glance at me first to see if I caught it. And I couldn't." She shook her head. "I couldn't maintain the distance. You made it impossible without trying." "I wasn't trying to make it impossible," he said. "I know," she said. "That was the problem." Silence. They stood in her living room 6 feet apart, and the air between them felt like something finally settling, like a thing that had been held at tension for a long time slowly going slack. "The job in Billings," he said. "Is it what you want?" She looked at him. "A year ago it was everything I wanted," she said. "I've been working toward principal track for 6 years. This offer is exactly what that work was supposed to lead to." "But," he said. Again, the same but, pointing at the same unnamed thing. "But I want to know if there's something here worth staying for," she said. "And I needed you to tell me, not hint at it, not joke around the edges of it. Tell me." He crossed the 6 feet between them. He stopped close enough that he could have reached out and touched her face. And he didn't. Because this was not a moment for gestures. This was a moment for honesty. And honesty was something he owed her without decoration. He said, There is something here. There has been for a long time, and I was too afraid to say it, and I'm saying it now. I want you here. I want you across the table from me, and across the road from me, and I want Lily to have what she already has with you, without any of us pretending it's something casual." He paused. "You're not the woman across the road anymore. You haven't been for a long time. I was just the last one to admit it." Olivia breathed in, then out. Her eyes were very bright. "The joke," she said softly. "That first afternoon." "The joke that wasn't a joke," he said. "No," she said. "It wasn't." She reached up and put her hand flat against his chest, over his heart, the way you touch something to confirm it's real. He covered her hand with his. They stood like that for a moment, still, quiet, the November cold still fading from his skin, and the mug going cold on her table, and the road outside empty, and the whole town going on around them, without knowing that something was being decided in this room that would change the shape of the next years of two people's lives. "I haven't said yes to Billings," she said. "I haven't said no either. I'm not asking you to say no," he said. "That's your career. That's your life. I'm not asking you to give it up." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking you to know that if you stay," he said, "it won't be for nothing." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "Okay." Just that. Just okay. But it landed the way certain words do. Complete. Weighted. Carrying everything. He exhaled. She took her hand back and looked at it for a moment, then looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, the expression on her face was fully open. No guard up, no careful distance. "Lily sent you, didn't she?" she said. Not a question. "Lily told me to go," he said. She said, "Okay, go." Those exact words. Olivia made a sound that was a laugh and something more fragile at the same time. "She told me last week that you were being stupid," Olivia said. Ethan blinked. "She said what?" "She said, and I'm quoting directly, My dad is being really stupid, but he always figures it out eventually. Olivia's mouth curved. I told her that was a very mature observation. She said she knew. He put his hand over his face. I'm going to have a serious conversation with that child, he said. Don't you dare, Olivia said. She's the only reason you're standing in my living room right now. He dropped his hand. She was right. He looked at her. This woman who had been across the road for 3 years, who had shown up with peach cobbler and craft supplies and the good crackers, who had loved his daughter without conditions and waited for him to catch up without complaint. And he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not attraction, though that was there. Not relief, though that was there too. Gratitude. Deep and specific and directed at nothing but this exact person in this exact moment. He said, I'm sorry it took me this long. She said, You're here now. He nodded. She picked up her mug. She looked at him over the rim with those dark, steady eyes. You should go get your jacket, she said. You crossed the road without it. I know, he said. I was in a hurry. Finally, she said. He laughed. She laughed. And the room felt warmer by 10 degrees. He went home. He crossed the road with his whole chest open to the cold November air, and he did not mind it at all. He went up the porch steps and through the front door and into the kitchen, where Lily was sitting at the table, eating the last of her grilled cheese with studied casualness, pretending she hadn't been watching the road out the window for the last 40 minutes. She looked up at him. He looked at her. Well, she said. Well, he said. A pause. Did you tell her? Lily asked. I told her, he said. Lily searched his face. Whatever she found there made her relax, spine going loose, the tension she'd been carrying for days visibly leaving her small shoulders. Good, she said. She turned back to her grilled cheese. It was about time. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He looked at his daughter. He thought about hours. He thought about go. He thought about, he always figures it out eventually, said to a woman his daughter trusted with the same certainty she trusted him, because Lily had understood before either of them that this was not a choice between one life and another. It was a life becoming what it was supposed to be. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers, the same way she had done to him. Thank you, he said. Lily looked at his hand, looked at him. For what? She said. For being smarter than me, he said. She considered this. You're welcome, she said. I've been waiting for you to notice. He shook his head. He sat back. Outside the window, the road was quiet. The house across it had its lights on. The afternoon was going gray toward evening in the way November afternoons do in Montana, fast and final and somehow still beautiful. He had 13 days when this started. He'd used one, but this time, for the first time in 5 years, he felt like he was counting toward something instead of away from it. And that made all the difference in the world. The next 11 days were different from anything that had come before them. Not easier exactly. Not without friction or fear or the particular discomfort of two people learning each other in a new way after months of careful distance. But different in the way that things are different when they stop being hidden. When something that has been living in the dark finally gets brought into the light and turns out to be not a monster at all, but something you recognize. Something that was always going to be yours. Ethan did not become a different man overnight. He was still quiet in the mornings. He still went to the barn when he was processing something large. He still reached for humor when sincerity felt too exposed. But he stopped retreating. That was the change. He stopped finding the exit. 3 days after the conversation in Olivia's living room, he drove to school pickup and waited by the truck. And when Olivia came out with Lily and walked toward him, he didn't look at the ground. He looked at her. He said, "We're making dinner. Come over." Not a question. Not a careful suggestion wrapped in 3 layers of plausible deniability. A statement. She looked at him for 1 beat. Then she said, "Let me get my bag." Lily looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Lily. Lily nodded once, slow and satisfied, like a general watching a strategy finally execute correctly. He shook his head. but he was smiling. Dinner that night was loud in a way dinners at Ethan's house had not been loud in a very long time. Lily, freed from whatever tension had been sitting over the house for the past 2 weeks, was fully, gloriously herself, talking without pause, demonstrating 3 separate things she'd learned in science class that week, conducting what she called an official taste test of 2 different kinds of hot sauce that Ethan did not remember buying and could only assume had appeared from the same mysterious place as the candle and the dried wildflowers. Olivia tasted both. She gave detailed scores. Lily wrote them down in a notebook. Ethan watched this and thought, this is what it's supposed to sound like. A house with noise in it. A table with 3 people around it. He did not say that out loud. But later, when Lily had gone to brush her teeth and he and Olivia were standing side by side at the sink again, their place, he was beginning to think of it as that, their place. He said, "Thank you for tonight." Olivia handed him a dish. "You made dinner." "You made it worth making," he said. She went still for a moment. Then she said quietly, "You're getting better at that." "At what?" "Saying the true thing," she said, out loud, without the joke first. He considered this. "It's getting easier," he said, "with practice." She smiled at the sink. He dried the dish, and neither of them said anything else, but the silence was the easy kind, and that was enough. 5 days before Olivia's deadline, she called the district office in Billings. Ethan didn't know she was doing it. He was in the South Paddock when it happened, and he wouldn't find out the details until later. What he knew was that at 3 in the afternoon his phone buzzed with a text from her that said, "Can you talk? Not urgent. Just when you have a minute." He called her back in 4 minutes. "I called Billings," she said, without preamble. His hand tightened on the phone. "Okay," he said carefully. "I didn't say no," she said. His heart dropped exactly 1 floor. Then she kept talking. "I asked them about remote leadership options, about whether the position could be structured differently, more of a district consulting role, split between here and Billings, with most of the administrative work done through the local school." He waited. "They said no," she said. "Olivia? Ethan, let me finish." He shut up. "They said no to the split arrangement," she said. "They need someone full-time, on-site in Billings. So I told them I needed to decline." A pause. "And they offered me something else." He exhaled. "There's a district instructional coordinator position that just opened up," she said. "Based here, covering 3 county schools including Millbrook Elementary. It comes with a salary increase, a leadership title, curriculum development work. It's not the Billings job. It's not what I'd been building toward exactly. But it's real. It's good work. And it's here." Silence. "I took it," she said. "I said yes this morning." Ethan stood in the South Paddock with the phone to his ear and the cold November air on his face, and he thought for a moment that he should say something meaningful, something that matched the weight of what she'd just told him, that honored the sacrifice she'd considered and the choice she'd made. What came out was, "You're staying." "I'm staying," she said. He pressed his free hand flat against the fence post next to him. "Okay," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Okay," she said, and there was a smile in her voice. "That's all you've got?" "I'm working on it," he said. "Give me a second." She laughed. He stood there against the fence post and let the laugh travel through the phone and thought, "I am going to remember this exact moment for the rest of my life. This cold afternoon, this fence post, this sound." "Olivia," he said. "Yes?" "I'm glad you're staying." "I know," she said. "I mean—" He stopped, started again. "I don't just mean for Lily, I mean for me." A long pause. "I know," she said again, softer this time. He hung up. He stood in the paddock for another minute, just breathing, just being a man standing in a field in Montana who had just been told the thing he wanted most was not disappearing after all. Then he went inside and called Lily's name and told her Olivia was staying. Lily's response was to drop the book she was reading, jump off the couch, and do a thing that could only be described as a victory lap around the living room. Arms out, making a sound that was somewhere between a cheer and a shriek, before stopping in the middle of the room and saying, with sudden calm, "I knew it." "You didn't know it," Ethan said. "I absolutely knew it," Lily said. "I told Cooper last week she was going to stay." "You told the horse." "Cooper is a very good listener," Lily said. Ethan sat down on the couch. He looked at his daughter. He said, "Come here." She came. He put his arm around her, and she tucked herself against his side the way she always had, and he sat there in the living room of the house that had been quiet for so long, and listened to the sound of his daughter breathing beside him, and thought, "We're going to be okay." Not the fragile, provisional kind of okay that he'd been carrying for 5 years. The real kind. The kind that lasts. Christmas that year was the loudest Ethan's house had been since Sarah. It wasn't planned to be loud. It was supposed to be simple. Ethan, Lily, Olivia. A tree that Lily had decorated with an enthusiasm that could only be described as aggressive. A dinner that had started as roast chicken and expanded through a series of decisions Ethan still wasn't entirely sure he'd agreed to, into something that involved 4 side dishes, 2 kinds of pie, and a batch of cookies that Lily and Olivia had made together the Sunday before, while Ethan sat at the kitchen table ostensibly doing accounts, and actually watching them flour dust each other and argue about the correct amount of cinnamon. Pete Callahan came. His wife Margaret too, with a bottle of wine and a look on her face when she saw the 3 of them together in the kitchen that said she had suspected this for longer than she'd admitted. Earl Gunderson showed up because Lily had personally invited him at the hardware store, which Ethan found out about approximately 40 minutes before Earl knocked on the door, holding a fruitcake, and looking genuinely delighted to be included. Janet Hollis did not come, but she sent a card that said simply, "Good, about time," which Ethan thought was possibly the most Janet Hollis thing that had ever happened. By 7 in the evening, the house was full of people and noise, and the particular warmth that comes from a space being used for what it was meant for. And Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway. The doorway again, always the doorway, but different now. And looked at the room and felt something so large and unfamiliar it took him a moment to identify it. Joy. Uncomplicated, unprefaced, unasterisked joy. He was still standing there when Olivia appeared beside him with 2 mugs of coffee and handed one over without asking. "You're in the doorway," she said. "Old habit," he said. "You're allowed in the actual room," she said, "in case you forgot." He looked at her. She was watching the living room, where Lily was teaching Earl Gunderson a card game that Earl was losing spectacularly and enjoying enormously. "Olivia," he said. "I love you." She went still. He hadn't planned it. It wasn't the setting he would have chosen if he'd planned it. Standing in a kitchen doorway at a crowded Christmas dinner with Pete Callahan, telling a story in the background, and Earl Gunderson asking Lily to repeat the rules for the 4th time. He hadn't arranged it. It simply arrived, the way true things do, when the moment is right and you finally trust yourself enough to let it out. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were very bright. "I know," she said. "I've been working up to it," he said. "For a while." "I know that too," she said. "I just—" He stopped, looked at his mug. "I wanted to say it. Out loud. No joke first." She reached up and put her hand against his face, the way she'd put her hand on his chest that day in her living room, to confirm something real. "I love you too," she said. "I have for a long time." He covered her hand with his. In the living room, Earl let out a shout that may have indicated he'd finally won a round, and Lily responded with what sounded like an accusation of cheating, and Pete's story peaked with a punchline, and Margaret laughed, and the house held all of it easily, the way houses do when they've been opened back up. Ethan and Olivia stood in the doorway. He thought about saying something else, something significant, something that matched the size of what was happening in his chest. He thought about it for 3 seconds, Then he stepped out of the doorway and walked into the room. And she walked in beside him. The proposal happened in February, which surprised Ethan because he'd always thought of himself as a man who needed to think things through from every angle before acting. And he had done approximately 45 minutes of thinking before he knew with complete certainty what he was going to do. He didn't do it with the ring at first because he didn't have one yet, and he decided that waiting for the ring was the kind of thing the old Ethan would have done. Found a logistical reason to delay, to take one more day, to stand in the doorway one more time. He drove to Olivia's house on a Wednesday evening in February with nothing except himself and what he wanted to say. She answered the door in reading glasses and an oversized sweater, and looked at him with the expression of a woman surprised to see someone at her door on a Wednesday evening. "Ethan," she said, "is something wrong?" "No," he said. "Can I come in?" She stepped back. He came in. He stood in her living room, the same room where he'd stood 4 months ago, and finally said the true thing. And he said, "I want to marry you." She took her glasses off. She held them in her hand. She looked at him. "I don't have a ring yet," he said. "I'm getting one. But I didn't want to wait for the ring because I've already waited long enough, and I think you have too, and I don't want to do that anymore." He paused. "I want to marry you. I want Lily to have what she already thinks she has. I want to stop being the man across the road from his own life." The silence that followed was 4 seconds long. He counted them. Then Olivia said, "Yes." Just that. Flat and certain and immediate. The way she'd said, "I agree" on a Saturday afternoon with glitter on the carpet, with the same calm and the same weight and the same quality of a woman who had known the answer for a long time and had simply been waiting to be asked. He crossed the room. He put his arms around her. She put her face against his shoulder, and he felt her exhale, long and complete, like a breath she'd been holding since October, since September, since the Saturday with the craft supplies and the joke that wasn't a joke. He held on. They stood there in her living room, not moving, not speaking. Just two people who had finally arrived at the place they'd been walking toward for longer than either of them had fully admitted. Lily found out at dinner the next night. Ethan had planned to say it carefully, thoughtfully, to gauge her reaction, to make sure she felt included in the decision and not surprised by it. What actually happened was that he set down the bowl of mashed potatoes, and Lily looked at the two of them, at the way they were sitting, at whatever was visible on their faces, and said before anyone spoke, "Did you ask her?" Ethan looked at Lily. He said, "Yes." Lily said, "Did she say yes?" He said, "She did." Lily turned to Olivia. Olivia nodded. Lily put her fork down. She was quiet for 3 seconds, which was the longest Lily had been quiet voluntarily in recent memory, and Ethan watched his daughter's face cycle through something enormous and private, something that was not just happiness, was bigger than happiness, was the particular relief of a child who has loved someone and wanted them to stay, and has finally, completely, been told they will. Then Lily got up from her chair. She went to Olivia. She put her arms around Olivia's neck and she held on, and Olivia held back, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. When Lily finally pulled back, her eyes were wet. She looked at Olivia very seriously and said, "I'm going to call you Mom." Olivia's breath caught. "Okay," she said. Her voice was barely there. "I'd like that very much." Lily nodded. Like that was settled then. Like it had always been that simple. Ethan sat at the head of his table and looked at his daughter and the woman who had crossed the road into his life and stayed, and he felt something happen in his chest that he did not have a name for and did not need one. They married in May, in the community park at the edge of town, where Ethan had taught Lily to ride a bike, and where half of Millbrook had spent summer evenings for 30 years. Small ceremony. 32 people. Pete and Margaret in the front row. Earl Gunderson in a bolo tie he'd clearly bought new for the occasion. Lily in a pale yellow dress she had chosen herself after visiting 6 stores with Olivia over 3 separate weekends, an experience Ethan had been excused from on the grounds that he had no opinions about flower girls and should not pretend otherwise. Lily was the flower girl. She took this role with the seriousness of a professional. She walked down the aisle ahead of Olivia with a basket of wildflowers and a focus so absolute that she didn't look up once until she reached her spot. And then she turned and watched her father watch Olivia walk toward him. And the expression on Lily's face in that moment was not the face of a child watching a wedding. It was the face of someone watching something be made right. Ethan stood at the end of that aisle and watched Olivia come toward him. No veil, just herself, in a dress the color of winter wheat, holding a small bunch of wildflowers that Lily had picked from the field behind the house that morning. And he thought about the Saturday afternoon with the glitter glue. He thought about the 2 words that had kept him awake. He thought about every doorway he'd stood in and every silence he'd chosen, and the long, slow journey from the man who made jokes about other men's luck to the man standing here, in this park, on this May afternoon, finally walking through the door he'd been standing outside for years. Olivia reached him. He took her hand. She looked at him with those dark, steady eyes, and she was not performing anything. There was no audience version of this. It was just her, just him. Just this. The officiant spoke. They answered. When it was done, Lily appeared immediately at Olivia's side, threading her fingers through Olivia's free hand, and the 3 of them stood together while 32 people cheered. And Ethan looked at his daughter holding the hand of the woman who was now her mother, and he thought, this is the thing. This right here. Not the ceremony, not the dress, not any of the visible parts. This is the thing that mattered. Years passed the way good years do. Not slowly, not quickly, but fully, packed with the ordinary, extraordinary things that fill a life when a life is working the way it's supposed to. Lily grew. The ranch grew. Olivia's work with the district schools grew into something that mattered to more families than just their own. The house that had been too quiet became the kind of house where people found reasons to stop by. Pete and Margaret for Sunday dinners. Lily's friends after school, former students of Olivia's who came back years later just to say thank you. Cooper the horse lived to be 26, which the vet said was remarkable, and which Ethan thought was because Cooper had always had a talent for sticking around through the important parts. And sometimes, not every day, not dramatically, but sometimes, Ethan would be standing in the kitchen in the morning, coffee in hand, and Olivia would be at the table with her reading glasses and her work. And Lily would come through on her way to the door, older now, taller now, but still with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. And she'd say something quick and funny on her way out and be gone before they could respond. And Ethan would look at Olivia, and Olivia would look at him over her glasses. And neither of them would say anything, because neither of them needed to. Because there it was, the whole of it. The life they'd built out of a scraped knee and a box of dinosaur Band-Aids and a joke that wasn't a joke and 2 words that meant everything. And Ethan would think about the Saturday afternoon, 5 years before, when he'd opened his mouth looking for a laugh and the truest thing he'd ever said came out instead. And he would think about the way she'd looked at him, calm and certain, like she'd been sitting on the answer for a long time. And he would think, I agree. He had said it as a joke. She had answered it as a promise, and every single day since then had proven that she was right, and he was right, and the luckiest man in the world was not some hypothetical stranger he'd been imagining when he said those words. It was him. It had always been him. He just needed the courage to finally say so.